You're listening to Crossover's Student Ministry Leadership Podcast.
All right, well, welcome back to Crossover's Student Ministry Leadership Podcast. We are excited to join you today to talk about a conversation that we have a lot of times with our leaders following an incident that's already happened. And so one of the things we want to do is just provide some clarity for our student ministry leaders of what it looks like to have confidentiality with students, and specifically looking at where's the line of that confidentiality. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this with your students, but the amount of times that we get asked by a leader, hey, I had this conversation with a student and they specifically asked me not to share it with XYZ, whether it's parents, whether it's you, the youth pastors, whether it's to make a report of that. And those things, I feel like for myself, they just make my heart sink because one, there is fear that is wrapped around those things. There is hurt that is often wrapped around those things, but also insecurity. And so today, the goal is just to talk about confidentiality with students. What is meant when we say that this is a safe place for students to share, but also understanding that some of these things that are going to be shared in safe places are very, very high risk, high stakes. And so we're excited to talk about this today. I am joined by Nick Vargas, as always.
Howdy, howdy.
It's good to see you. And then we are also joined today by Mr. Matthew Sowada. It's good to see you.
Caleb, it's good to be here.
Yeah. Matt, what is, you've been serving at LAFC for a number of years now with a number of different roles. Do you want to just explain a little bit what you do now?
What do I do now? I often call myself the executive pastor of etc.
Okay.
I get to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Officially, I'm the executive pastor of Discipleship Ministries.
Yeah.
I have the privilege of serving with adult men, youth men, and kid men, helping us think through what community and care looks like in each of those contexts.
Yeah. Okay. So you're kind of like the glue guy of everything,
Just
filling
the
in the blanks.
guy.
You know?
Yeah. Just call me Elmer. Elmer's glue.
That's fair. Well, you serve in a lot of ministries where discipleship overlaps with relational ministry and personal interactions with people. Why is confidentiality such a big deal, specifically within student ministry?
It's a good question. First and foremost, within youth ministry in particular, it's probably true of every ministry, but these teenagers are figuring out who they are.
Yep.
Right? They're figuring out who they are as a person. They're figuring out who they are in Christ, and you as a leader are part of that journey. They really want to know: is this a place where I feel loved? Right? I think the core, the student wants to know they're loved.
Yep.
And attached to that is, can I actually trust this person?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So trust and love, I think, are like kind of two sides of the same coin. And so since they're figuring out who they are, and this leader is in their life, walking through life, talking about Christ, pointing them to Christ, engaging in Scripture, checking out basketball games and things, they want to see if this love and this trust actually checks out.
Yeah. And
I think confidentiality on a student's end is a way they can do that. So as they start to open up, that some of those dark places in our hearts, and they bring light to it, it's a privilege as a leader to wade into that.
Yeah.
So confidentiality now becomes it's the currency of love and trust.
It's so fascinating too, because they're also, as they're figuring out who they are, right, they're kind of drifting not away from mom and dad, but searching other places to build that trust.
Exactly.
And that trust is equated to like, will they keep what I shared just to them, or will it bleed to the other spaces, right? Because I think oftentimes they are picking and choosing where they kind of invest that trust in. And so it's a high weight for them.
Yeah.
And the hard part, and again, we're dealing with students whose frontal brains are still forming, right? But they equate, will they keep this a secret? I trust you enough, right, to give you this secret, but I don't trust who you're going to tell it to, right? So the reality is that's the tension. We need to remind them there are situations. Hey, man, I love that you shared this with me. You trusted me. Do you trust me enough to handle this appropriately?
Yeah, and I think that's where why I would say confidentiality is so big in student ministry.
Yeah,
Because
it's
we're
huge.
trying to shift confidentiality just being about, will I keep your secret, to a,
Mhm.
do you just trust me to love you? Do
Mhm.
you trust me to love you well? Yeah.
Yeah. I think ultimately we're talking about confidentiality. We're also talking a lot about trust. I mean, you heard the word probably pop up 15 times right there. Trust is it's an aid in how we do discipleship. It's not the ultimate end goal as well, right? Like we want to build trust so that discipleship can happen. But it's such a blessing when we step into areas where students do trust us. When we see those moments where students are enacting this trust that has been built up for a long time. And, Nick, for you've stepped into many of these conversations where something that is very sacred or special to that student or intimate with that student is shared. How do you, when something is like that is shared with you, how do you instinctively feel when those things are shared
Yeah.
with you?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I'm just appreciative. Like, wow, like we talk about trust. We've built up enough trust where they felt like they could share something with me. So I'm just thankful that I have the privilege to step into this with them. And then I think immediately after, it's this, like, I feel like I need to guard it.
Yeah.
They've entrusted me, so I need to guard and protect that, because it is a sign that relationship is growing. And so I think my first inclination is I need to guard and protect that which they've entrusted to me,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I felt that in so many ways.
Mm.
Right? Someone opens up, and you're like, man, that's awesome. They did that. All right, now it's my responsibility
Yep.
to help them navigate that.
Yeah.
Right? The danger in that, right, is becoming the savior.
Yep. Yes. And I think we express this. This is a safe space, right? We want this to be a place where this trust can be cultivated, and you can share some of these things. I often wonder, like, what do we even mean by that? Like, Caleb, what would you say to when we say we're creating a safe space? What does that even mean?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because we often tell that to students, like, this is a safe place for you to share. And I think it has a lot to do with one, the way that leader can receive information, and then also an understanding of what that leader can do with the information as well. And so what I mean by the way that it is received, I think that when a leader is showing the value of what's being shared, I think it's huge. If a leader is going, I want to create a space where you feel listened to, and not only that, but we can actually continue to process. It's not just in one ear and, man, you had a place for it to land and it's off. But it's a place where things can get processed, and things and needs can be cared for. And I think for students, that might be where it stops, the idea of a safe place. I think the continuation of that in our minds, a safe place would be a place that it's also getting cared for, right? And sometimes the idea of it being safe means, in order to care, we need to take it to the next step. And that's not always just to stay between the leader and the student, but sometimes taking it to a place of authority or of care. And so,
and I think that's huge, because I think that's often probably where the ministry and students will miss each other. The students are hearing safe space and they go, this isn't going to go anywhere else. What we're expressing is, this is a safe space where you will be loved and cared for and listened to. And sometimes that means a step after. And in the student's eyes, because of how they were viewing a safe space, goes, that just breached what you said you were creating here. Yeah, it can be tough.
I think that's kind of what we want to get to today, right? Like, this idea of the confidentiality, and we can share, we can look at how confidentiality is handled in a counselor setting, and we want to make sure for youth leaders, there's an understanding that they are not the counselors, right? And that goes from a way that students process things with them, way that they process things with students, but also from the way that information is retained. And so there is not a clause that is built into our life group leaders signing up that says, like, you have to keep these things confidential or you lose your ability to serve. There's an understanding that, like, when things are past the line of something being able to be handled, they go to the next step. And so what is that line, Matt, as we think through the line of what we'd call maybe normal or counselor confidentiality between that and something that needs to go to a parent or professional or a pastor? What is the line that kind of comes up with there?
It's another good question. I think the end goal, right, is to see this teenager and these leaders, like me as a leader, but to see that individual grow in their relationship with Christ. Right? That's why we're doing this. And the reality is that there are things that happen day in and day out in their lives that might hinder that growth process. And so where is the line? How do we, Lord willing, we get to wade in and we get to journey with these students. But there are times when things are pretty severe, right? It might be abuse. If it's abuse, if there's trauma, if there's harm happening either to them or to someone else, there's a must in there. And we can't pretend like you just said, we're not professional counselors. Yeah. We're not trained to do that. None of you leaders get paid enough to do that. And frankly, there's a weight to do that we just can't handle. And so the goal isn't just to say, hey, student, go over here and get fixed so you can come back. The goal is to journey with them in that process. And you might be sitting with a parent talking through a scenario. You might go to a counseling appointment. You might sit with either one of you two, Nick or Caleb, and you process this with a student, right? Now you're an advocate as well. But in those musts, again, you think of harm, you think of abuse, you think of trauma, and that's when we must step out of this safe place and share it.
Yeah, I really like the way you put our role in retrospect is like we're trying to help growth process in a relationship with Christ. And so I often find myself putting it into two categories where it is essential to pass on to a parent or to somebody else if their physical life is at stake or their spiritual life and growth with Christ is hindered by something that is essential to pass on for the sake of that growth. I've hit a limitation within myself of what I'm able to provide in that space where I need to move forward.
Those are good categories because you think about the parent piece in particular. We as leaders, best case scenario, get 6 years with a kid. Yeah. Right? This parent is going to live life with them. Right? So for us to take something severe and keep it and not share it with the person who will live, Lord willing, 30, 40, 50, 60 years with this kid, like we need to partner with parents and include at times.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Well, we live in the state of Pennsylvania, and like there are things within the state of Pennsylvania that when it comes to our role as mandated reporters, and we'll kind of get to a little bit of explaining what that is, but there are things that we're required to just report, right? Like things that get shared from students and go, this needs to go up the chain to a place that is higher than just the parent or just going to a pastor. What would kind of like classify things that fall in a category like that?
You mean jumping all the way up to what are we mandatory? What are we reporting? If there is suicide, right? There's suicidal ideation. If there's sexual abuse, physical abuse, if there are things that significant trauma-inducing things. Now, there could be friends involved in this. This could be a teacher, a coach, a parent. This could be something this kid has witnessed, or it could have been done to them. There's a lot of big categories
for sure,
but those off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I think I often go to those two categories I gave. I think in terms, if we're going to report, I'm thinking physically, or physically in terms of like, is there any type of abuse, and is their life at stake, or somebody else's, right? Because there's so many different forms at which they could be harmed or at harm. And again, we hit our limitation. What could I possibly do to protect from? We need to get other people involved here.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, a lot of times those things, when they get shared with caveats of like, please don't tell anyone, right? And so there becomes that dance a little bit of like, okay, in my mind, I hear students saying this thing, and I hear also, my training going, I know what I need to do here. And what we would just kind of encourage out of that is asking the question, what's the best way to care for that student, right? Like those are some of the really hard and like sad ways that we have to engage with students. But they really do provide levels of care. And I think things that are really helpful within some of those situations is making sure that students also understand that like these things are out of care, right? It might not get received in a way that they totally are understanding of those things, but it needs to be shared with the student. This is out of care. This is not out of a checklist that I see you on to go, boom, I have to do this, so see ya. Right, this is out of care. And so some of those things you talked about, like that doesn't mean you can't still walk with those students through whatever those hard next steps are, but there does need to be next steps in those things.
Yeah, I love that. And you had even mentioned oftentimes when students will go like, hey, like, please don't share this.
Yeah.
Or they might even prefacing the conversation with, I'll share this, but you can't share it anywhere else. Yeah. I often try and get ahead of that and go like, I can't make that promise because I love you so much. Like I can't make that promise that I won't have to move past it. I want to love you the best that I can. And I've often seen that be fruitful in that it's still me trying to build up trust. It's not going, oh, you know what, tell me. And then, no, you know what, actually, I do have to tell somebody, right? I don't have to go back on my word. I was true to my word from the very beginning. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the other thing with that, in those moments where you need to report, don't just think of it as I'm dropping a grenade and then I'm going to run.
Yeah.
Follow up with the kid, follow up with the parents. Yeah. Like the way you respond after the report will communicate care significantly.
Sure.
And so more often than not, it's like, I don't know, should I call him? It feels awkward now. And there's this weird, but I think if you press it, it's only awkward because you make it awkward.
Sure.
And if you're able then to care, if you make the call on a Monday, follow up on Tuesday, and be present on Wednesday.
Yep.
We're still friends. I still love you.
Yeah.
I think that models, Nick, what you're saying, I think it models the care on the back end post-report.
That's so good.
And just being present. East Ministry is a ministry of presence.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Just continue to be present in those spaces.
And oftentimes, like, I think it's the sad reality of it. Oftentimes these types of reports don't get received well, like from the student's perspective. I have seen...
Or the parent's perspective.
Or the parent's perspective, absolutely. But I have seen many times where these reports are made, there's an immediate response from the student in a certain way, but the leader's really intentional, right? The leader's intentional with that. Like, I'm going to text the next day. I'm going to call the next day. I'm going to show up the next day. And I think a lot of times that proximity that is brought from the leader to the student to say, I'm still here for you. Like those things, they continue to build trust over time. And so I've seen like those hard experiences get redeemed in so many ways. And so, obviously, we're talking about some of the bigger things. We're talking about some of the things that kind of fall in a category of like, we hear these things, we have to send these up to a higher level than even parents or pastors or whatever it looks like. But what would be some of the things that would fall in a category maybe of, hey, this really needs to go to the parents, right? It could either be maybe towing the line of a report, or maybe it's just like, nope, these are things that parents need to be aware of. Where would you kind of just start drawing those lines?
I was thinking of a couple different categories. I think oftentimes we think in terms of severity, right? Like this severity is a category, like this is really going to harm the kid. Yeah. Is this harmful? Is it not? So that it definitely is a lens and angle. So severity is one. I think the second one is frequency. If this is becoming a pattern or a habit, and you smell weed as they come to church on Sunday, and you might need to confront the kid on it, or maybe they share that they've been hanging out with these friends and but I don't do anything. It's not me, it's them. Well, that becomes the people you hang out with will begin to shape what you do, right? So the frequency with which this sin pattern is playing out. I think there's another thing. There's trajectory. Where could this head? Like if you're starting to do this is the tip of the iceberg. They're probably only sharing they're not sharing at its fullest. They're not disclosing it all, right? So just being aware that if you're starting to do A, B, and C, D, E, and F aren't far behind. And so basically the hope would be including a parent when some of these sin patterns might become habitual. So if we can deal with them sooner, pointing them towards Christ, allowing them to experience this gospel freedom. So yeah, severity, frequency, trajectory would be kind of three angles. Might be worth including.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And for the listeners, I hope you hear it like as that's not super clear, right? Like, and I think like that is some of the nature of just no situation that we have with students is the same as the next, right? And so it does require some of that discernment from your end to go like, hey, what is the best way for me to intentionally care for the student? And so hopefully that framework kind of guides a little bit towards how you make these decisions. But I think a win that we would always say is just a absolute highlight for us is if we can get to a place where the student is willing to share these things with the parents themselves.
That's great.
Yeah. If we can get to a place where it's not us even having to go to the parent, but the student saying, yeah, I was afraid to take this to my parent and now I want to take it to them.
Yes.
We think
that's the student acknowledging there's a partnership between the ministry and the parents.
Yeah.
It's not like a teacher calling home just to inform. It's like, no, we want to actually walk alongside. So if you can share, then we can all seek to draw alongside as you journey deeper in a relationship with Christ.
Yeah. Obviously, that's kind of a little bit of like the line, right? When these things happen, though, we talked about how, it's often on a Sunday evening when we get done the evening and a leader comes like, I don't know whether I should share this with you or not because the student asked me not to. And we as the youth pastors, we kind of sit there and we go like, okay, like how do you decide when do we keep something private versus involve a leader of the ministry for wisdom or support in that?
I think that our leaders in particular within Crossover, they represent Crossover. And so when a student shares something with a leader, they're essentially sharing something with the ministry. And leaders as representatives, it is encouraged and it's okay to then share that with your coach and or your pastor.
Yeah.
And then at times, maybe you would need to come to me, right? Or others within the kind of that chain. And so you have coaches, you have Nick and Caleb, you have me, you have other pastors who we can help wade through this with you. So as representatives, I think when a student shares something, they're sharing it with the ministry. When in doubt, ask for advice, right? Ask maybe another leader, how would you handle this? Ask a coach, ask a pastor.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I know at the beginning of the podcast I shared my first inclination when a student shares something is I have to guard it. I also feel at the same time can I do this on my own? Like, do I need wisdom and discernment with another person? Because if I want to care for the student as best as I can, there's going to be times where I'm just not enough, and it's going to be better to seek wisdom in another place, or even just have another person to process with.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, just from a logistics standpoint for a leader, it becomes easier, right? It becomes easier when you're not just carrying whatever that thing is by yourself, right? It might feel like something that is small, but no leader in our ministry just has one student in their group, right? They have multiple students in their group, all sharing different things and carrying different things, and so
because they're all a mess. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, but when you are able to have a place where we can say, yeah, like if this student shares this with you, you are welcome to share that with someone that is one of the pastors on staff or someone that leads in the ministry. That allows you to not just carry that burden alone, but also with somebody. And it brings some of the guidance of, if you're wrestling with do I share this with a parent? Do I keep this to myself? It gives you an out to go, I have someone to process this with. And so
it's perspective.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're so deep in that relationship that you don't see a bigger perspective. And so having someone else who's on the outside looking in, it just gives you a lens that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of this becomes easier if students understand the expectations in advance, right? If a student already understands the framework of how this happens and some of the ways that these things get communicated, these things just become a lot smoother rather than something big happens and you go through I have to explain, these things. But Nick, how do we do that well? Like, how do we explain the lines of confidentiality and the limits in which we're actually able to carry that through, and still allow it to feel safe and natural for the student?
Sure. Yeah, I was thinking a lot about how just in discipleship, it's set up to be my love for you primarily involves me trying to guide you closer to Christ, kind of like what Matt was talking about. So even as we talk about wrestling with our own sin, a lot of the times it's guiding you away from the very thing you're drawn towards or pulling you somewhere where you might not know you need to go. But part of my loving you is giving the thing you don't know you need, right? And so I think a lot of times it's setting up what does it truly look like to love and love well. And that is I want this to be a space where we have a relationship and you trust, but no, like my role is to guide you. And sometimes that is either having to share something that you didn't want shared, or even maybe pushing you in an area where you didn't want to be pushed. And that's because I love you. And that's because what that means is I love you too much to let you stay where you're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's important. Like, I think that, like, if that concept is something that is understood well by the students, it's understood well by even the parents of the ministry. I think that the process of sharing difficult situations becomes something that flows a little bit more naturally. Obviously, it's still hard. Like, clarity doesn't necessarily remove the toll that this would bring on you processing these things, but it does remove just a little bit of the weight in some of those things. And so,
actually, I had a conversation just yesterday with someone, and we kind of had a disagreement. We were working through something, like a tense moment, and afterwards we were able to celebrate it because, and this is a concept, unity doesn't mean there isn't tension, right? Unity, you can have incredible unity in relational connect, like you guys can be lockstep and there still be tension. And that conflict, that little bit of a disagreement doesn't necessarily mean you're not united and moving in the same direction.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes those hard conversations, Nick, so clarity helps unity on the front end.
Yeah.
But modeling, what does it look like to agree to disagree? I love you, right? So it might be a hard conversation with a parent.
Yeah.
It might be hard, but that doesn't mean there's not unity.
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah. That's good. That would be challenging. Like, that's challenging to not just view unity as meaning there's not just tension still, right? Like, those are two things that in my mind, they somehow feel like they live separately, but like they do, like one doesn't mean there's an absence of the other. And so, that's really
so Paul uses the language of like different members of the same body, right? Right now, Xander's really into soccer, and there's been multiple times we're playing soccer, and he tries to grab the ball with his hand, but kick it with his foot at the same time. It's like both part of the same body. He's trying to do two things that seem to be contradictory. Right?
He's like he's trying to figure out what sport he wants to play. I don't know.
He just wants to be a goalie.
Yeah, it's like you can't do both, dude.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I was thinking about that language of unity and how we're all a part of one body. But oftentimes, when we're trying to grab and kick the ball at the same time, there's tension, right? We're trying to do two different things, and that can mean tension, but not unity or love.
Yeah. We want these moments of trial and of just hard conversations to result in something. We want to see the students cared for, and we also want to see them grow too. And so, obviously within the structures of our church, we have a lot of things that we ask our leaders to go through in advance. One of those being mandated reporting. We require every single one of our leaders is a mandated reporter, and what that basically means is, by requirement of the state of Pennsylvania, if they have something that falls in a category of whether that's that abuse or suicide or things that could be physical harm to the student in any way, like there is a report. And so obviously that's a huge step. And like that's something that as you are you're taking on roles of leadership, whether it's within the church, whether it's in a school setting, whatever it looks like, that's just a hard responsibility to carry. And every church will have different policies about specifically how this is handled and stuff like that. But on a ministry team, as we look at the way that a ministry team supports one another, whether it's you working with the youth pastors or you working with your co-leaders or other, maybe you have other leaders in the ministry you trust. How do you support each other well? How do you do and carry that burden well together, even when it's holding heavy information?
That's a good question. I think sharing the burden, we kind of talked about having a space to process, not keeping these things in a vacuum, but recognizing we're a part of one larger team. But also, I think throughout this conversation, I'm just like, man, it's a lot of steps and processing. Having other people involved as a team also allows us to rely upon the Lord in prayer.
Yes.
It also allows us to go before the Lord and go, would you give us wisdom and discernment on how we make steps to care and care well? Because the reality is some of these have implications, right? I think as we talk about mandated reporting, is the student at harm or at stake of being harmed, whether for abuse or themselves? And it can be easy to say, well, if there's any possible thought, make the report. The reality is that has implications on families and repercussions and follow-ups, and there's just so much involved that we go, Lord, we need you in making these decisions. And so I see such a unity even amidst a team in that we can rely upon the Lord together, but we can also process together to carve out the best way forward.
Yeah.
And you mentioned team. So Nick, I love prayer.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first. We can pray for each other in this, and we can pray for each other without even sharing all the details, right? You also have co-leaders, so every one of your leaders has a partner in that group, and so you're not alone just within that grade group. Then you have a coach, right? So you could say, man, prayer, help me make this decision. This kid is struggling with this. Would you just pray for wisdom? Right? James tells us we lack wisdom and ask of it. He'll give us wisdom in that. And we do have the Spirit residing in us who is given to us as a counselor. He's our guide in that. So we want to make sure we respond biblically, right? That's here's our framework. And so how do we make sure we do that? But not in a way that's just patronizing and slapping a verse on it. But
absolutely.
But I think Scripture gives us concepts and framework to actually play out. If someone else is struggling, I can encourage them with Scripture.
Yeah, I was thinking of that word encouragement.
Yeah.
Not even prior, but even following. I know
that's good.
With some of these heavy situations, I know you can make a decision. We prayed about it, discerned it, and then you get to the end. And if something comes up, some of these implications, whether a family gets upset or you're dealing with some fallouts of relationships, the first question is, did I make the wrong decision? To have other people involved in that can go, we faithfully sought the Lord in this. You made the right decision. We tried to be as faithful as we could. Let's continue to follow the Lord as we press forward.
I've felt that so many times. That question of like, did we do the right thing there? And how do we, and having someone else come around, text me a verse, remind me of, no, we walked to the best of our abilities through this. That affirmation has really been a blessing to me. So I think we can support each other by that encouragement piece.
Yeah, and I would encourage, just as we're kind of wrapping up things here, if there is ways that you are kind of processing this episode in a way of like, man, I know the exact circumstance I'm thinking through right now, I would encourage you, like, find ways, first and foremost, to bring that before the Lord. I think that is, ultimately, we can, as youth pastors, we can give advice. As youth leaders, we can give support. As leaders, we can try to rationalize our decisions, but ultimately it comes down to dependence, right? In what ways are we seeking to depend on His guidance and His wisdom for those things? And so, thank you guys for joining today. It's been fun. I don't know if fun is the right word. This is not a light conversation by any means, but I think productive. I think it's really helpful to just start adding language, but also steps to understand, man, when these things come up, how do I just start to process these things well? And so. I hope you guys hear, as listeners, that if there is a way that you need to process something, we are totally here for you. And that line of Do I bring it to them? Do I not bring it to them? It doesn't need to be a question. You're more than welcome to share with us these things that you're processing. But praying for you guys this week, hoping to see you guys soon. Thanks for listening. We'll see you later.